to make her stay one last night. They say every town has its secrets. Ours had been quiet until the night the sirens came. It was just past midnight when the call came in. A single vehicle, a mangled body, and one man standing beside it, bloodied, shaking, and repeating the same phrase over and over. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. The man was Daniel Rourke, a teacher, respected, kind, a husband, and the victim, his wife, Emily. She was found pinned between the rear bumper and a tree at the bottom of their long, winding driveway, still in her robe, slippers soaked in blood, her face peaceful, almost like she never saw it coming. Neighbors had heard the crash and called it in. But what police found when they arrived didn't quite match Daniel's story. He told them he had backed out in a rush, that she came running behind him at the last second, and he hadn't seen her. But then, why did her injuries suggest she had already been on the ground? Why were there no skid marks? And why was Daniel's GPS data from earlier that night showing a location far from home? One he hadn't mentioned at all. As the paramedics loaded Emily's lifeless body into the ambulance, a detective leaned in and asked Daniel a simple question. Why was your trunk open when we arrived? Daniel froze. He didn't answer. But from that moment, everything changed. The trunk. It should have been a small detail, an oversight. But in a crime scene, nothing is ever just a detail. The detective's eyes lingered on it, open wide like it had been pried, not popped. Inside lay a blood-stained blanket, folded, carefully, too carefully. Emily's blood was on it. But why would a blanket be in the trunk, soaked in blood? If Daniel had simply backed over her in a panicked mistake. Can I call someone? Daniel asked, voice hollow. My brother. I need him here. But the detective wasn't ready to let him go. Not yet. Daniel, walk me through it again, she said. Everything. From the start. Daniel's hands trembled. We argued. She ran outside. I thought she was gone. I needed air. I got in the car to clear my head. When I backed out, I didn't see her behind me. I swear to God, I didn't see her. The detective watched him closely. You said she ran out. You waited, then backed out. How much time passed between her running and you leaving? Daniel hesitated. I don't know. A minute? Maybe two. The detective nodded slowly. We're checking your vehicle's onboard system. It logs every door opened, every reverse shift. It'll tell us how long you were in that car. Daniel's eyes flicked down. That was the moment the panic slipped through his mask. In the background, a forensic tech called out, We've got something. Everyone turned. Lying in the grass near the mailbox, hidden under a pile of fresh leaves, Emily's cell phone, still recording. A voicemail from Emily's mother, time-stamped 5 minutes before the crash. But what made the detective's heart pound was the second message. One Emily had recorded herself, seconds before she died. I'm scared, her voice whispered. He's not the man you think he is. And then, silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of a car door slamming shut. The detective looked at Daniel, but Daniel was already backing away. Emily had always been described as trusting, too trusting, some would say. But in the weeks before her death, something had changed. Her sister, Marissa, remembered a phone call that now felt like a warning cloaked in small talk. She said, If anything ever happens to me, don't let him tell you it was an accident. At the time, Marissa laughed it off. Couples fight, right? But now, with her sister's voice whispering fear into that voicemail, it felt like a prophecy. Back at the station, detectives replayed the audio again and again. Each listen chipped away at the story Daniel gave. Her words, that voice, I'm scared. He's not the man you think he is. The crime scene techs continued their sweep of the property. Behind the garden shed, tucked behind a stack of cinder blocks, they found it. Emily's torn sweater, blood-stained, not from a fall, not from being run over, from blunt force trauma. And in the garage something else. A hammer, washed, but not clean. Blood had pooled into the rubber grip's crevices. Luminol confirmed it. The blood was Emily's, and it had been wiped poorly. Detective Claire Evans had seen enough. She returned to the interrogation room. Daniel was quiet now, fingers tapping rhythmically against the metal table, as if the ticking in his head was louder than the one on the wall. She placed the hammer on the table. Daniel didn't even flinch. "Where did you hit her first, Daniel?" she asked softly. He looked up slowly. "I didn't," he replied, but his voice was too calm, too empty. Claire leaned forward. Emily was recording. Her phone heard everything. "We know it wasn't an accident. What we want to know now is why." That was when Daniel cracked, not into a confession, but into silence, the kind that tells you everything before a word is said. And still, one question burned through the air like static before a storm. What had Emily discovered? What had she known that made her so afraid to stay? Daniel was the kind of man who made people feel safe. Friendly at barbecues, polite to the neighbors, always offering a helping hand. But behind that practiced smile, there was rot. Detective Claire began pulling his past apart like old wallpaper. She started with his phone records, and that's when the trail began to reek. The week before Emily's death, Daniel had searched for things no grieving husband should ever have to explain. How to erase text messages permanently? Can police trace deleted files? How long does it take for a body to stop bleeding? Each search was time-stamped, hours before Emily fell. But there was more. Claire tracked down Emily's best friend, Rachel. They hadn't spoken in nearly 2 months, but the last message Emily sent her chilled everyone who read it. "I think he's watching me. I don't feel safe anymore. I need to get out." Rachel thought it was about anxiety, maybe paranoia. Emily had always been sensitive, but now it read like a final plea. The detectives also found Emily's private email account, one Daniel clearly didn't know about. Inside was a draft of an unsent message. "If you're reading this, it's because something happened to me. I want people to know the truth about Daniel." She had written it 4 days before she died. But what was the truth? The medical examiner's report arrived the next morning. The wounds weren't consistent with a single blunt strike. There were at least 3 separate impacts, none of which could have been caused by falling onto gravel. Daniel's accident story had officially disintegrated. Claire stared at the report, jaw tense. There was no hesitation in those blows. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was methodical, intentional. Still, no confession, no camera footage, no witnesses. Then a new detail emerged. Security footage 2 streets away caught Emily's car the night before. She was driving fast, erratic. She pulled over and opened the door as if to flee, but didn't. Why did she turn back? Why had she come home? And that was the haunting question. What held her there? What silent threat kept her from running when she had the chance? Emily came home, and by morning she was gone. What did Daniel say? What did he promise? And was that the moment she unknowingly signed her death warrant? The house was quiet that night. Neighbors didn't hear yelling. No screams. Not even a door slam. Just silence. Detective Claire stood in the center of the master bedroom, eyes sweeping over the ordinary. Pillows slightly indented. A glass of water untouched on the nightstand. A hairbrush with strands of Emily's auburn hair still clinging to the bristles. Everything looked normal until you looked closer. On the floor, just below the window, was a tiny smear of blood. Almost invisible. But forensic light told a darker story. Someone had tried to clean up. The pattern didn't match a fall. It matched a struggle. Claire's fingers hovered over the edge of the dresser drawer. Inside, she found Emily's journal, half buried beneath receipts and tangled jewelry. One entry stood out, dated just 3 days before her death. "If I disappear, it's not an accident. I think he's going to kill me." That sentence hit like a knife to the ribs. Sharp, final, and terrifying. So why didn't she leave? Claire followed the thread straight to the couple's joint bank account. In the weeks leading up to Emily's death, Daniel had transferred large sums of money from their shared savings into a hidden account under his name only, almost $25,000. And then, a life insurance policy, recently updated, Beneficiary, Daniel Reed. Amount, $750,000. Date modified, 5 weeks before Emily died. It was no longer a theory. Daniel had motive. He had a plan. He had everything to gain. Claire looked again at the security footage. Emily stopping the car, nearly fleeing. And she realized something heartbreaking. Emily knew. She knew he was going to hurt her. She just didn't know when. And here's the question that won't stop echoing in your mind. What would you do if the person you loved most was the same person who might kill you? What would you do if no one believed you? Emily tried to warn the world in whispers. But now, the truth was screaming. And Daniel? He was still walking free. But not for long. They returned to the house with a warrant this time. Claire didn't come alone. She brought a full forensic unit and the quiet certainty that they were no longer just dealing with suspicion, but the unraveling of a calculated lie. The smell hit first. Not rot, not blood, but bleach. Everywhere. The floorboards near the kitchen had a faint discoloration. Subtle, barely a tone off, but to trained eyes, it screamed of hasty cleaning. Under blacklight, the stains lit up like ghosts. Violent streaks pooled beneath the laminate. A spray, a drag, a struggle. But the most chilling find wasn't on the floor. It was in the walls. Literally. The crime scene tech ran a ground-penetrating scanner along the hallway where Daniel claimed Emily had slipped and hit her head. Behind the drywall, something dense, something human-shaped. They began to tear it open, bit by bit, like peeling back the lies. The hammer hit insulation, then plywood, then something that shouldn't have been there at all. A ring. Emily's ring. Her wedding band. It was embedded in the sheetrock. As if flung. As if she had fought back, and her hand punched through the wall. She had tried to leave her mark. One last signal. One final scream, muffled by drywall and deception. This wasn't an accident, Claire whispered, staring at the wall like it was sacred. She was trying to tell us. Daniel's story began to crumble. His "I was in the garage" alibi didn't hold. The neighbor's Ring camera caught him dragging something heavy into the backyard. He said it was firewood. Claire found the firewood neatly stacked, untouched. Untouched like the truth he never meant to speak. And then, the audio recording. Emily's phone, cracked and bloodstained, had been tossed under the couch, probably forgotten by Daniel in the panic. But it had recorded everything. It was 3 minutes and 47 seconds long. Long enough to hear the argument. Long enough to hear her plead. Long enough to hear the moment it all went quiet. And at the very end, a voice. Daniel's voice. "You made me do this. Now look what you made me do." The room went cold as Claire listened. This wasn't a man grieving. This was a man confessing, to no one and everyone. What do you call a murder that hides behind "I love you"? What do you call a lie that wears a wedding band? Emily called it home. Daniel called it an accident. The walls told the real story. When the recording surfaced, everything changed. Claire didn't need to shout. She simply played the audio. At the station. In the DA's office. For the chief. And finally for Daniel's family. The same ones who had defended him, called him misunderstood. A good man. Not capable of something like this. But as Emily's terrified voice echoed through those 3 minutes and 47 seconds, they sat in stunned silence. No one moved. No one cried. It was as if they all heard the truth, and were frozen by it. "Daniel, please, please stop." Thud. Silence. "You made me do this." Emily's parents broke down. Her mother clutched a photograph of her daughter's wedding day, now tainted by that same man standing beside her in a suit and tie, smiling. What kind of monster wears a smile while holding a secret like that? Claire went public. At a press conference under storm-gray skies, she spoke with controlled fury. "We now believe Emily Daniels was not killed in an accident, but in an act of domestic violence, carefully disguised as one." The media swarmed the story. Headlines blared. "Husband claims accident. Evidence points to murder. Audio recording uncovers chilling final moments. Wife's ring found in wall." Was she trying to escape? But it wasn't just headlines. The town turned cold. People who once waved at Daniel in the grocery store now crossed the street. Emily's friends, quiet at first, started coming forward. One said she noticed bruises. Another said Emily had confided about being scared to make him mad. One friend revealed Emily tried to leave 6 months earlier, but Daniel had convinced her to stay. He told her, "No one else will ever love you like I do." And she believed him. But love doesn't kill you. And Daniel's love came with silence, with gaslighting, with isolation. Claire's team dug deeper. They pulled credit card records, finding receipts for industrial cleaner, bought just 1 day after Emily's death. Security footage showed Daniel at a local hardware store, buying tools. Not for fixing the kitchen, for covering his crime. He smiled at the cashier, just like he smiled in his wedding photos. Just like he smiled the day police knocked on his door with a warrant. The town that once called him a quiet man, now they called him what he was. Killer. The gavel dropped like a thunderclap. State of California versus Daniel Marks. Inside the packed courtroom, the air felt like glass, thin, tense, ready to shatter. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the nation watched from every corner. Morning shows, crime podcasts, Twitter hashtags. Everyone wanted to know, was this husband a grieving widower or a calculated killer? Daniel sat at the defense table in a navy blue suit, hands clasped, face blank. Not a tear, not a flicker of remorse. Just that same expressionless mask he'd worn at the funeral, when he told reporters Emily tripped. Now he was surrounded by lawyers instead of mourners. Claire stood tall in the front row. She had promised Emily's mother, "I won't stop until he's held accountable," and she didn't. The prosecution opened with a powerful line. This was no accident. This was control. This was cruelty. And in the end, it was murder. Then they hit with the recording. Again, the courtroom froze. Emily's voice, her terror, her begging, the thud. Daniel's chilling words. "You made me do this." A juror looked down, fighting tears. Another clutched his pen, knuckles white. Emily's wedding ring, recovered from behind the bathroom wall, was displayed like a piece of broken truth. Why hide it if she died in a fall? Then came the texts. "I feel like I'm walking on glass with you. You scare me sometimes. I can't keep living like this." The prosecution's final punch? A journal Emily kept, hidden in a locked drawer. Pages of quiet pain. "If anything happens to me, don't believe it was an accident." The defense fired back. They painted Daniel as stressed, grieving, a man who had snapped under pressure. But it didn't land. When Daniel took the stand, his voice trembled, but not with sorrow, with annoyance. "I told her to stop. She wouldn't. It just happened." Claire leaned forward. So did the jury. And the cleaning supplies? The fake timeline? Her ring in the wall. Daniel hesitated. I panicked. But panicked people don't rewrite crime scenes. Outside the courthouse, people gathered with signs. "Justice for Emily." Listen to her voice. It wasn't an accident. Each day, more of the town came out. Not for spectacle, but for justice. Emily had been silenced in life. Now they made sure she was heard in death. The trial stretched for weeks. Tension built. And on the 19th day, the jury walked back in. A single sheet of paper in the foreperson's hand. You could hear the courtroom breathe, then hold it. The foreperson stood, calm, composed. But their hands trembled ever so slightly as the clerk took the slip of paper. Claire gripped the edge of the bench in front of her. Her heart beat like a war drum. Behind her, Emily's mother whispered a prayer. The judge looked down, then up. "Will the defendant please rise?" Daniel stood. His lawyer touched his elbow, subtle, steadying. But Daniel didn't look at the jury. He looked at the floor. On the charge of first-degree murder, how do you find the defendant? A pause so thick it could split open the room. Guilty. The sound that followed wasn't a cheer. It was a release. Claire's eyes filled, but she didn't blink. She couldn't. Emily's voice, her fear, her hope, her warnings. They had finally been heard. Daniel didn't react. No outburst. No plea. Just silence. The kind of silence that echoes guilt. Reporters outside scrambled to push the news live. Breaking. Daniel Marks convicted in the murder of his wife, Emily. But inside, Claire wasn't thinking of headlines. She thought of the photo on Emily's nightstand. The one of them as girls in matching dresses. She thought of the voicemail Emily left the day before she died. You always knew when something was wrong with me. I need that again. Call me. Claire never got to return the call. But in this moment, she had answered it in the only way that still mattered. 2 weeks later, during sentencing, Claire stood before the court. Emily was not just my sister. She was a light. She was warmth. And he tried to extinguish that. But she burns brighter now. Through truth. Through justice. Through all of us who refuse to forget. Daniel was sentenced to life without parole. He didn't flinch. But Claire caught it, a twitch of the jaw. A crack in the mask. Maybe, just maybe, the weight of what he'd done had finally settled in. Outside, rain fell softly, just like the day Emily died. But this time, the storm didn't feel cruel. Felt cleansing. People left white lilies on the courthouse steps. One card read, "For Emily, you were right. It wasn't an accident." It was quiet again. Not courtroom quiet, soul quiet. Weeks had passed since the verdict. The world had moved on. But for Claire, time hadn't. Not really. She still walked past Emily's house on her way to work. Still paused at the corner mailbox where Emily once waved from the porch. Still expected to hear her voice in the wind. But now there was peace behind the pain. Because Emily's voice hadn't been lost in the storm. It had been found. In a small community center, Claire started a foundation in Emily's name, the Red Thread Project. It was for women who whispered instead of screamed, who flinched when the door creaked, who smiled with bruises beneath their clothes. The project helped them write their stories, leave when it was hardest, speak when they felt invisible. Because, Claire said at the launch, my sister's story won't end with how she died. It will continue with how others survive. Daniel, now inmate number 73984, sat alone in a maximum security cell. The walls were gray, the same shade as Emily's eyes the last time she begged for help. Every day at 7:43 a.m., the time Emily's body was discovered, a light above his door flickered on. It was automatic, scheduled by the prison system. But Claire liked to believe it meant something. Maybe fate has a schedule too. In the end, justice wasn't just a verdict. It was memory. It was action. It was truth echoing louder than lies. Claire visited Emily's grave one last time that spring. The headstone was simple. Emily Grace Marks, 1987 to 2023. You were right. It wasn't an accident. She placed a red rose on the grave, then whispered something only they would understand. The wind picked up and carried it home. Some stories don't end with a scream. They end with a whisper heard by those who refuse to forget. If you or someone you know feels unsafe, speak. And if no one listens, speak louder. If the story moved you, share it. Leave a comment below. What warning signs do we still ignore? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more haunting human stories from the Veil of Secret.